Welcome back to the road to City Hall. Members of Congress are back home today, and they are getting an earful about health care after the House voted by a razor-thin majority to advance Republican legislation that would repeal the Affordable Care Act. Joining me now to talk about the road forward are two of the Democrats who voted against the plan. They're getting ready to meet face-to-face with constituents at a special town hall meeting in Brooklyn on Monday. Nydia Velazquez represents parts of Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, and Yvette Clarke represents parts of Brooklyn. Welcome to both of you. Good to see you. And I want to start with a real basic question, which is why I've heard two different theories about why the Republicans were pushing so hard, so quickly to get a repeal bill done, even if it didn't have much of a chance in the Senate. The two theories that I heard were that they just wanted to keep their promise because they've been promising to do this for 7 years. The other theory is that they needed some savings, that the financial part of this plan is linked to their desire to enact tax cuts and do some other things in the budget. Which is it?
I would say that is neither. Well, it is a combination of the tax cut and the promise that they made, but also Donald Trump needed a win. So he was totally depressed. The American people, they knew what it meant to allow for the Affordable Care Act to be repealed without any replacement. And so they went out, they expressed themselves, they raised their voices, and we forced, together with the American people, we forced the Republican and Paul Ryan to pull that bill out of the calendar. And so now they came back with this bill that is worse than the first one. And what it's going to do is going to kick people off, 24 million Americans.
But here's what I don't understand is even your Republican colleagues, even the ones whose ideology is completely different than where you might be coming from, why are they so determined to try and humor the president? You know, which is essentially what you're saying, is if he needed a win, so let's give him a win, I guess to make him feel better. It doesn't have much to do with the substance of the legislation, its chances of actual passage through the Senate. And I thought that even Republicans were, you know, jealous guardians of the separation of power and Congress's prerogative. Why are they trying so hard to make the president feel good? I
think he changed his tactics toward members of Congress, made more phone calls and more meetings, and convinced the Freedom Caucus members, I don't know how, but that they really backed away from the promise that they made that will never support legislation without the CBO scoring it, that they will never vote on a legislation that they haven't read. And none of that was important this time around.
Right, all of those promises went out the window. And the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, normally it would sort of give a score, meaning estimate as best they could the economic impact of an important bill like this. They didn't even bother to do it this time.
They didn't. They didn't bother to wait for the score to be released. So the score will be released, and many of us believe that it'll be worse than the 24 million that were predicted before because of the essential benefit packages being degraded and the waivers, as well as the Medicaid cuts, and you know, the ability for states to sort of manipulate the program in order to exact whatever savings they want to, and this is tremendous in terms of what it's going to mean for the healthcare of American people.
If I may, remember that right after Republicans pulled that legislation off, Trump said we're going to move next to a comprehensive tax bill. But then they realized that they couldn't have comprehensive tax reform without the savings that were supposed to come out of repealing Obamacare, close to $1 trillion. That's right.
Right. So to the extent that you're going to meet with your constituents and try and explain all of this to them, are you in some ways preaching to the choir, right? I mean, I know your districts very well. They're very heavily Democratic. You probably haven't gotten a lot of phone calls, or have you?
Oh, yes, we did.
Well, from people saying what? Not saying to repeal, but to say to vote no, right?
Vote no.
And not one Democrat voted yes on this bill.
No,
Did that take any kind of arm twisting or caucusing from Nancy Pelosi and the leadership?
Well, I mean, we knew already from the predicate to this particular legislation that this was a bad deal for the American people. So there wasn't a whole lot of convincing because we stood together the first time, we were prepared to stand together the first time that they offered this.
Right.
This bill is worse than the first one. So.
This now sets up the possibility that 2018 would be, among other things, the 2018 congressional elections, a referendum on repeal and replace. Is that what you're expecting to see happen?
Definitely. To take money, to kick people off the Affordable Care Act 24, to cut Medicaid by $840 billion over 10 years, to provide states with the option to opt out of the pre-existing condition requirements. Oh my gosh, that is heartless, and they're going to pay a price for that. This is why we're doing this town hall meeting on Monday. It's a political town hall meeting, so it's not a town hall meeting sponsored by our congressional offices.
Right.
And the reason is that people in our districts, they're asking us, what can we do? How can we defeat this policy and any other policy coming out of this administration?
And what is the answer to that? Is it about targeting particular
There's a lot of strategizing,
districts?
and I think what this does is it actually clarifies a lot of what needs to be done, because in New York State, we have Republican congressmen that just threw everyone under the bus, the entire state under the bus. You look at someone like a Chris Collins, who offered an amendment in the law that would shift the support that we give to safety net hospitals here in the city of New York to upstate New York, where there are far less residents. I mean, he just did some spiteful things to the state. And the overall bill itself, you can look at folks who are on Long Island, people who are upstate Republicans that really, did damage.
So you raise an interesting point. Everybody forgets, but New York, in some ways, is a prominent swing state.
Absolutely.
Not overall, but when it comes to congressional districts, there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that will shift in any given cycle.
Absolutely.
So you all are talking about organizing New York City Democrats politically to take on some upstate New York Republicans?
Correct.
And
We
whatever
have
needs to happen,
nationwide, there are 35 competitive districts. But in order for us to have any opportunity here in upstate New York, we have at least 4 congressional districts or more. But there are areas where Hillary Clinton won or she lost by a small margin. And so in order for us to have any opportunity, New York and New Jersey are key states. And we think that it is the potential of being victorious in those districts is real, and we need to organize and see how can we channel the energy that is out there.
Yes. One of the things I've seen happen, because when talk is sort of turned into strategy, a lot of different things can happen. So downstate Democrats have talked about winning back the state Senate, and they send New York City liberal Democrats into upstate rural districts where they stick out like a sore thumb, alienate everybody, and somehow the seats don't flip. How would you avoid that particular challenge?
Well, we're going to have experts that are going to be participating in a panel discussion, and all that will be answered that day, but also resources.
That's right.
So how could you feel good that you're making a contribution, that you are providing support, whether it's grassroots organizing or a contribution, a monetary contribution?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that. You got to mobilize the money, too.
Absolutely. There's also phone banking. You know, you don't necessarily have to leave your community to share points of view about what is taking place and making sure that people are conscious.
And it's information.
Yes.
How can we share information? How can we educate? How can we, share with voters in upstate New York that Obamacare gave them insurance coverage?
Yes.
And they didn't discover that. They didn't know that 1,500 counties nationwide voted for Donald Trump. And if you look at the rate of Medicaid recipients, is very, very, very high. So we need to do a better job at helping them connect the dots. But they're going to find out. They didn't know that it was Obamacare that gave them insurance coverage, but they are going to find out that it was Donald Trump who took it away.
We have a special election coming up in June in Georgia.
Uh-huh.
We all need to focus on that election like a laser.
Okay.
Those are some of the things we want to encourage New Yorkers to do, quite
Get involved
frankly.
with Georgia 6 and some of the other
Absolutely.
districts. Okay, very
Absolutely.
interesting. Well, while I have you here, Congresswoman, Puerto Rico, something we've talked about a number of times, took another step and actually sort of broke new ground in filing or petitioning for a form of bankruptcy.
This is the largest municipal bankruptcy filed in the United States.
Yes, in U.S. history, yes.
That's correct.
Where will that leave the island? Will it be harder to do business there?
Well, it's going to be tough, no doubt about it, but Puerto Rico wasn't protected by the bankruptcy law. Puerto Rico was excluded in 1984. And so right now, they've been empowered to use this tool that would allow them to file, that they did this past week, for bankruptcy in federal court in Puerto Rico. Today, Chief Roberts appointed the judge that is going to hear the case. We need to have an orderly restructure of the public debt. We need to provide the resources to make sure that safety and security for the people of Puerto Rico, that workers' pensions are protected, and to force this vulture companies that bought bonds, 20 cents to the dollar, for them to understand that they cannot expect to recover 100%. Right. And so the only way that we can assure that there's going to be a haircut of 80% or 70% is by having this orderly restructuring.
Okay, we'll be keeping an eye on that as well as on your town hall. The town hall will be this Monday evening at 7 at St. Francis College in downtown Brooklyn. We're going to take a short break now. Straight ahead in our Friday Reporters Roundtable, are we in for a Republican summer of Massey versus Malliotakis in the race for mayor? I'll talk it over with our Friday Reporters Roundtable. Stay with us.